Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Pearlman.
Hello. For the next half hour, we are going to be talking about the significance and importance of solar cooking around the world with my guest, Ruth Holton Hodson. She is a member of the Board of Directors of Solar Cookers International, and she has had a 35-year career as a consumer and health advocate in state government, philanthropic, and nonprofit sectors. She was formerly the Deputy Treasurer for Health and Retirement Initiatives for the California State Treasurer John Chiang, and was also a Deputy Controller for Health and Consumer Policy in the California Controller's Office. She has spent almost 10 years working for the California Wellness Foundation as a Special Projects Director and then Director of Public Policy, and she was a former Executive Director for California Common Cause. She began her public policy career as a lobbyist for the California Children's Lobby. She also is on the board of the California Budget and Policy Center and is a volunteer with Third Act Sacramento and NorCal Resist. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Your organization, Solar Cookers International, is doing a superb job in trying to help people change the way they cook so that they don't destroy our ecosystems by having to use wood, having to use biomass. In fact, your organization won the Keeling Curve Prize in 2021 in the category for social and cultural pathways. Before we talk about all the good things about solar cookers, we better describe what exactly it is.
Yeah, often people think it must be something quite complex when it's actually very simple. They are devices that capture the energy of the sun through the use of reflective surfaces to cook food and pasteurize water. Those reflective surfaces can be as simple as aluminum foil or mirrors, metal, which are attached to a frame, generally a box, or it could be even a cardboard box or a wooden box. Many people, when I talk about this, say, oh, I remember doing this thing with cardboard box and aluminum foil when for a science class or a Girl Scouts project. And once you have that box, you put it in sort of direct sunlight. You have to use a pot with a black surface and a lid. You put that pot into your box, you cover it up with glass, and then the sun hits the reflective surface, which then hits the pot, and the pot heats up. So it's very much like if you were sitting in a car with black seats and the windows rolled up in the summertime, and you know how quickly you heat up. That's what's happening to the food in the solar cooker.
It's amazing that you can get it as hot as 302 degrees Fahrenheit?
Yeah, you can get very hot and hot enough to cook food and, most importantly, to also pasteurize water.
You consider it easy and fun to use solar cookers?
Using solar cookers is really fun, and the food that comes out of it is really delicious. What I find is that also when you cook, you don't have to stir the pot. If I'm cooking rice or beans or any kind of grain, I frequently forget that it's like, oh my gosh, I have it in my solar cooker, and I run out there and it's just fine. Whereas if it sat on the stove and I forgot that something was on the stove, it would burn. Because solar cooking, the heat from solar cooking comes all around. It's not heat from the bottom, and so you can't burn your food.
We have in this world 2.1 billion people, or nearly 1 in 4 people worldwide, who lack access to modern cooking fuels and rely on polluting fuels such as charcoal and firewood to cook. This would be a very inexpensive, easy way for those people to save money and be able to buy food and cook the food and not have the harmful effects of cooking on an open fire. Because I was surprised to learn about some of the statistics where children are more than 5 times more likely to die from burns caused by a kitchen fire than burns caused by deliberate or accidental accidental torch. In other words, they're also breathing fumes that can harm them internally, health-wise. I'm just surprised that we don't see every country advocating solar cookers.
Actually, it gets even worse. For women in particular, some of those bundles of wood can be greater than 60 pounds, which they carry in their heads, and they have to go out into the forest, and so really put themselves at danger for attacks and sexual violence. And then also for women in particular, just think of the extraordinary amount of time that is lost focusing on cooking. I mean, if you had to spend as much time cooking and focusing on producing a meal every day, you would get nothing else done. And so this isn't just about cooking a meal. It's about improving human health, particularly women's health. And as you said, no more breathing in the toxic smoke. Solar cookers can also be used to pasteurize water. It protects the environment because people no longer have to go and cut down the trees. Half of the deforestation in Kenya is a result of people cutting down trees for cooking. I think it's just really a remarkable and such a simple tool, if you like, that addresses so many problems with just a simple thing called a solar cooker.
We mentioned the harmful effects of the current methods of cooking with an open fire, and I didn't realize that household smoke from cooking fires kills more people than HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria combined. And we hear so much about those problems and conditions, but we don't really hear about household smoke.
Yeah, well, I think in part that's because everybody does it. Over 2.4 billion people around the world cook mostly with a stove over an open fire.
However, the problem I have found in trying to get either Americans to use it, because we're wasting energy using gas or electric stoves. We could put a solar cooker in our backyard, go to work, come back, and have our food already cooked for dinner. And also when I tried to introduce it in East Africa, in Kenya, I gave solar cookers to people. I explained how easy it is. You put the cooker out, let the sun do it. You could put your water in there and purify your water so you have clean water. And yet I came back and they weren't cooking with it because it was a different style of cooking. They're not used to putting the food in, not being over the fire, stirring it and taking care of it. So it changes the traditional way of life. Have you found ways to overcome that?
Well, that's a really important issue because a lot of people think, well, they're so great, let's just hand them out in refugee camps and walk away. Well, people who are living at that level have experienced so much trauma, they just want to do something that they know how to do. And it's very hard to sort of switch to something new, even if it's terrific. So we have this ongoing project at the Kakuma refugee camp in northern Kenya where we actually identify sort of who are the informal women leaders in the community and then focus on them and train them on how to use the solar cooker. And it's so simple, but they want to know, I mean, they can't quite hardly believe I can cook my traditional dishes just using the sun? Well, how does that work? So the women actually, when they're converted, which is easy to do, and they're like, yes, you can cook everything that you would normally cook using the sun. And look how much time you have freed up. Look how much money it saves because they have to pay for wood and charcoal and gas. And so when they start seeing what the benefits are from leaders within their own communities, from women that they respect, then they want to adopt a solar cooker. And then you have train the trainers. And that's really the most effective way to spread the word. It's not sort of white people coming over and saying, here's this magic machine and go have at it. Even here in this country, people are much more likely to be interested if they see someone demonstrating it, have some solar cooked food, and can see, wow, this is really cool. It's very much, I actually cooked with it just yesterday. I have it out in my backyard, and it's like a crock pot. You just put the stuff in and put the lid on, and 2, 3, 4 hours later, depending on what you're cooking and depending what type of solar cooker you have, it's done. And I can tell you, the first time I used one, I took a sweet potato. I didn't poke holes in it or anything. I just popped it in the pot and put it in the solar cooker, and 45 minutes later, I had the most delicious sweet potato. It was so creamy. me. And I had just gone around doing whatever I was doing, and then it's like, oh, right, I have this in the solar cooker. I'll go check it, and it was done.
You mentioned the Kakuma refugee camp, which has about 289,000 refugees, and since 2018, you've been involved in over 400 locally constructed solar ovens that have empowered 3,245 refugees to lead healthier, safer lives. But there's still lots of thousands of people left. Is it a problem to get solar cookers to more people or to teach them how to build them because there are no international funds available to do so? And you're a nonprofit organization based in Sacramento, California, and I'm sure your resources are limited how many you can give away. So how do we get more refugees and individuals in need to learn how to make them as well as learn how to use them?
As I said, we do work at Kakuma, and for Kakuma, we actually work with a group called Eco Mandate based in Nairobi, and they're the ones that make the solar cookers that we use in Kakuma. And we raise funds. As you said, they're not free, and we have to raise funds to get those solar cookers there. But really what we are doing, I mean, as you said, we're a small organization in Sacramento, California, with staff in other parts of the world, but we have 7 full-time staff, that's it. So our focus really is working through the United Nations and introducing at all the COP conferences every year, the climate change conferences every year. We connect with elected officials and environmental health officials from all over the world, and we promote solar cooking. Through that, we're working now with Mali, and we are working with the Central African Republic, and when you work through governments, they get really interested in, wow, how can we promote solar cooking in our country? That's the most efficient way of then getting solar cookers out throughout the world's poorest regions. And the United Nations has set up a climate fund that we have worked with several countries to apply for that funding. And once they get that funding, then we consult with them on how they start up pilot projects. There are other countries, like Germany's equivalent of USAID, funded us to consult on a project in Yemen, for example, which taught girls and women how to use solar cookers, how to build solar cookers. And so we've been working with them for 2 years, and now they're on their way. That's the way that a small organization like ourselves can really help spread the use of solar cookers throughout the world.
You mentioned the United Nations Climate Change Conference. It's important that these large international global events show the value of solar cooking and set the example. You have also worked with the United Nations High-Level Political Forum and the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women and several others. In addition to having a solar cooker for a family, a small unit, you can also build a solar cooker that can handle large amounts of food, large solar cooking systems that have been developed, because there are many different types of solar thermal cookers, like the box cookers, the panel cookers, and the parabolic cookers.
Well, there's actually one of the projects which I would love to see at some point in time is in India. There's a temple that feeds 50,000 people a day. What they do is they look like satellite dishes, but they have these huge parabolic solar reflectors on the roof which turn with the sun, and they're attached to enormous water containers, heat up the water, then the steam is got vented to the kitchen, and so they're all steam stoves, just like a gas stove, except it's steam instead of gas coming out, and they cook all this food on the steam. India uses a lot of solar cooking and different solar cooker devices like that.
There's so much going on in this field of solar cooking, and we're going to find out more about it when we return in a moment with my guest, Ruth Holton Hodson, who is with Solar Cookers International.
Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman continues with further discussion of the world's critical ecological issues. For more information, you may call 310-559-9160 or go to www.ecoprojects.org. Now, Here's Nancy.
I'm speaking with Ruth Holton Hodson, who's a member of the board of directors of Solar Cookers International and volunteers with many other organizations. We're talking about Solar Cookers International, SCI, and it won the Keeling Curve Prize for Social and Cultural Pathways. Solar Cookers International promotes solar cooking, and in doing so, you have a recipe book, you have an instruction book, how to actually build one yourself. I've seen it. It doesn't seem that difficult and that hard. They're not really that expensive to buy either.
No, they're not. What I would encourage folks to do is one of the main things that we do to promote solar cooking is we actually have the Solar Cooking Wiki, which provides a wealth of knowledge with almost 1,800 pages of information about best practices, how to build solar cookers, recipes, how to implement a successful solar cooker project, different news and events. There are 142 country-specific solar cooking information. You can go on the wiki and then just type in a country, and then it will bring up what's happening in solar cooking in that country. It's fascinating. You just want to go to solarcooking.org. That's SOLRCOOKING.org. You can spend hours just going through. It's really fascinating seeing where the solar cookers are, what great projects. There are a lot of exciting projects happening now with a real focus on women and girls. There's a great project in Mexico really focused on solar drying. So you can take food and you can dry it, and they show how to make the solar dryer, and then they sell the dried food. Lots of fascinating information.
You have all this information and links on the organization's website, www.solarcookers.org, SOLARCOOKERS.org. So there's so many ways to find out more about what's happening.
If you want to follow solar cooking and sort of follow up on everything that you've heard, I would encourage people to go to our website. You can sign up and get our newsletter. We don't bombard you with emails, and follow us on Facebook.
Since Solar Cookers International is a nonprofit organization, you encourage volunteers to start promoting solar cookers in their own communities. They don't really even have to be affiliated with you. They just can take your advice and suggestions, correct?
Absolutely. And then, of course, we always love to have people who can donate to Solar Cookers International. Particularly, it's important now. Fortunately, we did not receive any funding for USAID, but if you want to figure out ways that you can help in poor countries, particularly the ones that we're targeting, then we always welcome contributions, and any size is vital.
We mentioned some of the areas that your organization has tried to get people to adopt solar cookers, a refugee camp in Kenya, but we have so many countries around the world. How do you decide where to go? The need is great.
The need is really great, but the most important way and the way we decide to go is which countries are the most interested. So, for example, when we went to COP 2 years ago, a woman, the environmental minister from Mali, came and talked to us, thought the idea was terrific. We engaged in conversation with them. They really wanted to figure out how they could spread solar cookers. We helped them apply for the climate change grants at the United Nations. They were awarded it, and now we consult with them. So that's really how it's done. You really have to identify who are leaders in countries that see that this is something that would be really beneficial. And I think what happens over time is just like in a community, just like in a refugee camp, you identify the people that are really interested, you work with them, and then other countries go, wow, look what's happening in Mali, and look at that success. We can do that too. So that's the way it spreads.
Most people probably think that this is only valuable in hot areas that have sun beaming down all the time. But when I was in the Swiss Alps in Switzerland, we took a cable car up, and lo and behold, our lunch was being cooked in a solar cooker.
Oh, that's great.
It was as delicious as ever.
Solar cooking does not need heat. It's about the light of the sun. All you have to do, that shiny surface needs to capture the light of the sun, which is then reflected into the pot. So it doesn't matter if it's 40 degrees or even 2 degrees. We have a huge solar cooker promoter and great volunteer who lives in Minneapolis. I went to visit him 2 years ago at Christmas, and he had baked in the solar cooker delicious banana bread, which he served to me and my family. And it was probably about 5 degrees outside.
It just shows that we have to understand the technology a little bit better and can all find out how to use it and adapt it. Because as we began the program, we talked about how important it is to change from using fossil fuels, firewood that either deplete our natural resources or cause health issues, to people using those kinds of cooking fuels. And the statistics for why solar cookers are really a key driver of climate change by reducing carbon pollution and replacing the need to source wood for fires is amazing. It's estimated that over 30 million metric tons of CO2 emissions are prevented over the lifetime of the world's solar cookers, and that these emissions are equal to not driving over 76 billion miles or not burning over 34 billion pounds of coal. How does one come up with all these statistics?
Those statistics are all courtesy of the United Nations and various scientific papers on using solar cookers. But another statistic that is super important, and one that always causes me pause, and I always have to double check it, is that estimates are that one family cooking with wood burns 1 ton of wood a year. So you extrapolate that to the 2.4 billion cooking mostly with firewood, and you can see how quickly deforestation happens, which then of course has its own ramifications, further degrading the environment.
We also forget that in other places that don't have the kitchens that we do, where we turn on the electricity or turn on the gas stove, that if families don't have access to firewood or other cooking fuel, they may be forced to consume raw meats or go hungry, and that leads to serious illness and malnutrition. And so providing a way to cook not just meats but vegetables and maybe even fruits, what can't be cooked in a solar cooker?
Actually, everything can be cooked in a solar cooker. It just takes time. So people think, ooh, you can cook chicken in a solar cooker? I've had more than one friend that sort of raises their eyebrows about that one. Yes, I make chicken and rice all the time. It takes probably 4 hours. Again, you can cook anything in the solar cooker that you would use a crock pot for. Because as you said, the solar cookers get hot enough that it pasteurizes water, it can cook food, all kinds of food. So it's very simple. They'll heat up to 180 to 250 degrees Fahrenheit, and food cooks at 180 to 195 degrees Fahrenheit. Definitely hot enough to fully cook meat, and then of course vegetables and fruit. I make a delicious rhubarb strawberry sauce. You just put the strawberries and the rhubarb together, put a little sugar in, and 30 minutes later it's all bubbly and ready for ice cream.
I wish this weren't radio and I could actually taste what you're cooking. You personally have been an advocate for consumer and health issues. You've worked in government. You've worked with nonprofit organizations. You have worked in the political arena, whether or not it's for children, for adults, it's for the public. You volunteer locally as well, working obviously internationally. How did you connect to solar cookers when you've been involved in so many other causes?
It's interesting. I connected with them many years ago, helping a friend find a job, and at the time there was a nonprofit newsletter that came out which had job announcements, and there was a job announcement for a fundraiser at Solar Cookers International. And I thought, oh, what an interesting group. I grew up overseas. My dad was in the Foreign Service. I always thought I'd love to do something that benefits internationally. I'd love to focus on women's health, and it's like, wow, here we have this little organization in Sacramento, California that fit the bill. So I contributed money for them for a very long time, and then a friend of mine said, you know, Solar Cookers is looking for board members. Can I recommend you? And I said, oh, I'd love to. And so that's how I got on.
The mission of Solar Cookers International shows that it is concerned about a broad range of issues. Being an environmentalist for decades, I've always thought of it as a great ecological solution to a major problem. And yet, the organization is concerned about improving human health, economic well-being, women's empowerment, as well as the environment by promoting this climate-friendly alternative to our current methods of cooking. So you, too, see a connection of many of the concerns to make our planet a healthier place, make people have a better, healthier environment, and to protect our ecosystems by not destroying them, which in turn protects wildlife, which we all depend on to have their home not destroyed.
Right, and in fact, what is so remarkable about Solar Cookers International and Solar Cookers itself, and one reason, and in fact probably the main reason, that we won the Keeling Prize is that solar cooking meets all of the 17 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It is not just about cooking, as I said. It is about protecting women's health, children's health, pasteurizing water, protecting the environment, freeing up women's time to pursue other activities to help their families and communities. And it saves communities hundreds of thousands of dollars every year because they don't have to buy wood, they don't have to buy charcoal, they don't have to buy kerosene, and you just use the free sustainable energy of the sun.
I'm here in Los Angeles, and we have been told to have our emergency earthquake kit. And in that, I have a solar cooker because the water might be cut off. I want to have clean water. If I have to get it from another source, I can put it in the solar cooker and get it pasteurized and clean. I can cook food, and there's a lot of value to it when our gas, electricity, and water might not be available from the utilities. So it's important even for us in the developed urban areas.
We also have a program where we test the effectiveness of solar cookers, and then we'll rank them.
Something we also didn't talk about is reducing our utility bills. The sun is free.
And that's what's so important. The sun is free and it's sustainable. If you still have a gas stove in your house, you're not only paying for that gas, but you're also breathing in the gas. So with the microwave, you're paying for the electricity bill. Now, the only thing is you can't just stick a frozen dinner into a solar cooker and expect in 5 minutes that it's going to be done. So that's the only thing. It just takes longer, but if you are used to using a crock pot, then you know how to use it. As I said, I just put stuff in the morning, or I think about what I want to have the night before, and there's some terrific solar cooking cookbooks that are out there. You can cook all kinds of grains. I've been making lots of salads with farro and chickpeas and black beans and lentils. Lentils take about 40 minutes, and if you cook them too long, well, then you can put them into a stew.
You plan what you're going to eat in the morning, and it's real easy.
Yep.
I've been following your organization for many decades. The technology has changed a little bit. Who's doing the research and seeing what kind of design changes are needed?
Well, there are actually lots of people that are fascinated, a lot of engineers, types, fascinated with solar cooking. This fellow that I mentioned that lives in Minneapolis, he tries all sorts of things, and they're all different shapes and sizes. People are just out there inventing stuff all the time. There are new ways of capturing the energy of the sun.
What's interesting is when you look at the history of solar panels, solar cookers, actually some people were doing it over 100 years ago, but it just didn't catch on.
Because it goes back to the question that you asked about why did the women in Kenya not use it right away. People are comfortable with what they know, and they're worried, well, is it going to cook meat? Is it going to cook the thing that I always cook using my traditional dishes? How is it going to cook that? I don't want to experiment. I don't want to waste money. That's why it's so important to have demonstrations both here, and then particularly important to have people who are demonstrating in communities that really need them, having trusted communicators there, showing them it's delicious. Look, I'm cooking my regular stew or whatever it is, my traditional dishes. I can do it in a solar cooker.
Thank you so very much for encouraging people to adopt solar cookers, letting us know that it's easy, economical, ecological. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you for the invitation.
I have been speaking with Ruth Holton Hodson, who is on the board of directors for Solar Cookers International. I'm Nancy Pearlman. Thank you very much for joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host, Nancy Pearlman, is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.